And
Good
here
morning,
is good.
everyone. So nice to see all of you this morning. And yes, it was wonderful to see everybody last week. Talking with everybody over the course of the week. I actually had my discussion last Wednesday. For those of you who were at retreat, I did my regular call last Wednesday. So if you want to go back and look at it, you can. It's about defining your brand. And today we're going to pick up on that. But one of the observations that I made last week was that when you're meeting someone at a place like retreat, you're having an experience of that person. In other words, their brand as a human being or as a professional or both is coming through in how they're interacting with you. And when you go to retreat and you're meeting so many new people, you're meeting them and they're talking with you in a certain way, and they're listening to you in a certain way, and they're interacting with you in a way that gives you an experience of them. And when you're meeting someone for the first time, you start making conclusions about that person. You might say, wow, this person's really bright, or this person is a kind of a crazy party person, or this person is very calm and I don't know, intellectual or something like that. As soon as you start interacting with someone, you start to make certain conclusions about that person. And so from that point of view, being thoughtful about how you want to be seen by others, how you want others to have an experience of you, is really important in your professional life and obviously in your personal life too. So we're going to take that a step further today to think about projecting our brand. And we're going to do a little more discussion today. I only have a couple of slides that I wanted to share with you, but I wanted to have you share with me your philosophy a little bit on taking your brand and projecting it out into the world. So if I were to ask you, first of all, what do you think projecting your brand means? What does that mean to you? Let's hear from a couple of you.
The perception that people have of you in a very short period of time.
Okay, got it. How people might perceive you, their perception of you, even in a very short period of time, or longer, certainly, of course, but absolutely in a very short period of time. Thank you. What else? What do you think of if you think of the term projecting my brand?
David, I think you cannot create a brand that you're not of it. Means that you cannot have two personality or two things. When you're a real estate agent, you're talking to the clients, or you're talking to another agent or a buyer or manager, one person. Then when you get in a car and you go home, you're going to be a different person. So these branding things, I think, it means that fundamentally changing yourself to be, say, okay, I'm gonna listen to somebody that talk. So you listen to your customer, to their clients, and when you go home, you listen to your son or daughter or wife or girlfriend, boyfriend. So I think the branding have a different connotation. Branding means, like just showing, but in reality, you're not. It's like a clothes you change. You wear. Another thing that I noticed that I'm very different, that all you guys have a solid color shirt all the time. Never ever either you or Chirag or other coaches have a shirt that has a pattern, because I think you want to be uniform to everybody, because somebody doesn't like the circles, for instance, or something. So, but is it you really? I don't want to be that. I want to be whatever I'm home at work and at work at home. So right now, really, I'm doing whatever I'm learning here at work, that I practice it at work. I bring it home. So it is my.
Thank you, Mo. And thank you, Ryan, for throwing a couple things into the chat. Daniel, please, what's your thought on this? What do you think of projecting a brand?
Good morning. I just wanted to say I usually think of how Chirag used to mention what are the top 3 things that people would say about you. So I try and think about, when I gathered the feedback, which it was quite surprising actually. I try to wrap my head around the top 3 things that people would say about me. and then I try and adjust it to what I would like people to say about me, right? The top 3 words. And so I try and go by how I would describe someone with those 3 words. How would that person carry on a conversation? How would that person be on the listening side, on the speaking side? And that's where I try to carry my conversations towards. Of course, there are conversations that are they just get out of control in a good way, right? Like I forget about those 3 words, and so I engage at a deeper level. But for my basic conversation, I try and think about what I would like them to describe that conversation as after the fact.
Got it. I think that's one wonderful way to look at it, to really be clear about what it is you want people to experience of you. And that's what they would say to others. Daniel is so caring, or he's so dedicated, or he's so thoughtful or supportive, or whatever those words would be, can be a clue as to what you want to build your brand around. And I talked last week about being clear about what your personal or professional values are, what your beliefs are. And that's where you should be coming from. I'll talk more about that maybe in a minute. Thank you, Daniel. Michael?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. My nose is a little bit stuffy. I'm debating since years about this whole branding situation. And one thing I learned in real estate is that we are individuals, and I'm the same person at 9 o'clock as I'm the same person at 9 p.m. There are no 2 brands. There's one brand, and that's me, Michael Faber, right? So it goes back into this whole thing of like Instagram profiles for the business part, and Instagram for this, and TikTok for that. And, there is only one person in ourselves. Whoever thinks there are 2, in my opinion, are slightly misguided, which is the majority. So, and this honing down on like, oh, you need to brand, you are the brand, period. And there is, in my opinion, as I said, I'm repeating myself, there's only one person of you. You can't, if you are at 9 a.m. when the phone rings, a different person, then you're not genuine. It's not like Coca-Cola product where you actually have a product. The product is the person. And I think that's how I handle it myself. That I only have one profile, and I mission mesh personal and business together. And funny enough, where I learned this, and again, I may be wrong, was Frederick Eklund. I was friends with him back in the days, and he said, Michael, there's only one Frederick and one Michael. So, that doesn't do anything. If now he has this wine and all that stuff, that's a different story, but that's a product. But when it comes to real estate, that's what the people want. It's this one person. That's my 2 cents of it.
Got it. Thank you. So a couple of you have identified the importance of some authentic or genuine aspect of your brand. Let me ask this next question. When and where do you project your brand? Miriam?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Can you be more specific?
Well, I actually, my brand is sustainable living, farm to table, go local. And I use that in my branding with regards to my weekly newsletter, with regards to my monthly postcards. But I also reflect that, for instance, I drive a Tesla EV. Whether people, it's apparently right now pretty controversial. And I wear shoes that are made of recyclable plastic, roti shoes. They're comfortable, they're pretty. And so I try to always reflect that.
Got it. Thank you. That's a lot of specific examples there. Thank you. Who else? Where and when do you project your brand? Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, so Mo, I'll do a better job not wearing solid color shirts moving forward. I work with military people. Some of you have been to San Diego, so you've seen that it's a military town. And so I advertise my brand, like Marian mentioned, in my newsletters. And also when I go to networking event, I wear clothing or shirts or jackets that has like military, emblems on it so that I can connect with those types of people.
Got it. Thank you. I asked the question, when and where. The main question is how, but it is important to consider this question, when and where. And actually, I like Miriam's answer, everywhere, because from my perspective, we are always projecting our brand. And whether we're conscious of it or unconscious, and Chirag was just saying a minute ago, I want everything that you do to be planned and purposeful. We've talked about that before. Most of us don't realize that every time we put ourselves out into the world, we're putting some version of ourselves into the world. Whether we're sending a postcard, whether we've got an advertisement somewhere, whether we have an event, when we're doing an open house, every single time the world experiences us, either virtually or in person, they're having an experience of us. In other words, whatever our brand is being experienced or realized by them. And so a question for us always is, are we projecting the brand that we would like to be projecting here? Or are we just kind of like doing this unconsciously? It makes perfect sense to me that you might send a card, out to the world with your logo on it or your colors of your organization. That's perfectly, perfect branding, marketing type stuff. But did you ever think about how you text somebody? Or when you text somebody, or your choice to text somebody or not? That's also part of your brand. If your brand is about care and concern, it might be perfectly appropriate for you to text somebody when you heard that they were sick or in the hospital. And when you do that, not only are they comforted by having you reach out to them, they recognize that as part of your brand. And if that were Daniel, they might say afterwards, wow, Daniel is so caring. Because I was in the hospital, I don't even know how he heard about it, but he came to the hospital just to make sure I was okay. I never expected that from my real estate agent, right? And so he had an experience, that person may have had an experience of you being especially caring in that moment. Now, maybe you're not trying to project your brand, you're just being your real self, as a couple of people said here. But the point is, when you do think about what you want other people to say about you, it's some reflection of how they've experienced you. And what we said last week was a brand is the promise of a future experience. Whether you send out a card for the very first time to someone who's never met you, knows nothing about your business, that's their first experience of you, it's saying something about you in that moment. Likewise, the earlier example of meeting someone for the first time at retreat, in the first 2 minutes, they're having some experience of you. And maybe they think you're wild and crazy. Maybe they think you're, serious and buttoned up or whatever. They're still having an experience of you, and that's setting an expectation for the future. And so your brand is setting up an expectation for what they might experience at a future date, whether they happen to be in front of you or it's just some mailing or something going out. And so if a brand is the expectation of a future experience, then we're always projecting something about ourselves. The question is, are what we projecting really in alignment with what we want that brand to be? And what I see in many agents is, in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. Sometimes a person who might want to appear to be very responsive and organized might send out a mailer, 2 days ahead of the event because they didn't get to it sooner. And so somebody might say, okay, well, I got this last minute mailer to this event the day after tomorrow and I can't go. And so it's nice that this person invited me to such and such an event, but I can't make it. And so my experience of that person is he or she tells me too late for me to be able to enjoy the wonderful things that he or she might be providing. It makes me wonder whether he or she is organized enough and thoughtful enough to do things, because my experience of that person is they sent something 48 hours ahead and it's too late for me because my calendar is already full. So when we're thinking about, when and where do we project our brand, we're doing it at every moment. Even those of you who are sitting here on these calls every day, once a week, whatever it is, you're creating a brand expectation in everybody else here. And probably many of you have had some other agent from this community or the larger Compass community reach out to you at one time or another because of something that they experienced here. Maybe it's the thoughtful way that you answered a question that me or Chirag or somebody threw out there. Or maybe it's a question that you posed to the group. Or maybe it's the fact that you volunteered to lead an accountability group or something like that. Others are having some experience of you. And while nobody here is going to be a client, they could certainly be a collaborator. And so you are all projecting your brands to some degree right here on these calls. The fact that you don't turn your screen on or off, right? I mean, that's another thing that Chirag often talks about, right? And we were talking about this last week at retreat a little bit. It is funny to me. I mean, I've worked with people from all different industries around the world, and it is funny to me that real estate agents who are generally so personable and want to be personable and are in a personal service business show up in a community and don't turn their video on. It seems a little incongruous to me, but I recognize sometimes people are driving or they just got out of the shower or just working out or whatever. But even a little thing like that makes me think something of somebody. It's easier for me personally to connect with the people whose faces I see every week here, as opposed to the names of someone that I've never seen before. It's something about attaching a name to that person, right? So the littlest things are always projecting something about us. So let me pull up just one or two slides here, and then we have maybe a minute or two to talk about that afterwards. All right, projecting your brand. So first question, what does projecting a brand mean? Well, what it really means is intentionally creating a specific experience for another that's in alignment with your brand. Now, we're always projecting, as I just said a minute ago, we're always projecting, in a sense, unconsciously. Everything we do, everywhere we show up, how you sit, how you talk, how you dress yourself, all those things do have some kind of an impact in creating an experience or a perspective for others. If we're talking about projecting it in a planned and purposeful way, it's about intentionally creating that experience for another. And so I'm sure you do this lots of times. When you first meet a client, you give everybody, let's say you give them a pitch, and you want them to have some experience of you. You want them to know that you're knowledgeable and you're thoughtful and you're service-oriented and all those things. You think about those things. That's great. But are you thinking about it in all the other instances? As Miriam said, everything. If it's everything and everywhere all the time, then what areas of your business might you not be giving specific intentionality to? And so when you say, okay, I'd like to project my brand in a more purposeful way or a more intentional way, how do I do that? Well, I just want to share with you a simple checklist of questions you can ask yourself at any moment in time with any situation that's in front of you, whether you are going to talk to a client on the phone, whether you're going to talk to a potential client, whether you're going to show a house and somebody might walk in the door that might become a client, or maybe when you're designing or about to send out your next mailer. Any of these things are opportunities for you to be a little more intentional. And here's some questions you can ask yourself when that time comes. In order for me to project my brand in a way that's consistent and effective or powerful, here's some questions to ask. They're not the only ones, but here's a number of them. First of all, these all relate to a specific experience, not general overall, but I'm thinking about this in terms of a specific situation that you have in front of you right now where someone will be interacting with you either personally or through a card that you're sending or a newsletter that you're sending out or whatever. This is a big problem that I have with newsletters. A lot of people send out a newsletter to touch their clients or somebody in their sphere, but the newsletter may have A, not useful information to your client, or B, it's not necessarily aligned with your brand because a lot of the newsletters are kind of canned information from here, there, and everywhere. And it's not necessarily brand aligned. So first of all, in this specific situation, who is my target audience here? Who am I going to be interacting with? And that spurs all kinds of questions, like what do they care about? What's happening in their life right now? What are their concerns? All the stuff that would be something like part of Med C or any kind of like fact finding is part of who is my target audience. What is my message? If my target audience is this group of people, what is it I'm trying to communicate to them right now? That's not an easy question to answer. It seems easy on the face of it. But if I were to ask you to write your answer down, what is my message to these people? and why is that message kind of relevant to them right now, then it might be hard for us to do that. And if it is hard for us to do it, it means we're not quite clear enough. How does this experience relate to what my audience is interested in? A huge question. And this is, again, the big problem with newsletters. You know, many newsletters that I've seen go out and they just clog up people's email boxes. And of course, nobody wants to have their email box and their time hijacked by information that's not useful to them. Couple other questions. Am I delivering it in terms my audience understands and will respond to? How do I know? And so this is not where you want to be, let's say, inauthentic, but it does mean that you want to broaden your own way of interacting so that you can communicate in a way that the other people understand and can respond to. So you might serve somebody who's 75 years old, different from a millennial that you might serve. Maybe their language is different. Maybe their understanding of technology is different. And you might want to adapt yourself in an authentic way to whatever it is you're dealing with. And next, am I delivering it in ways that my audience prefers? And this second question is important. Have I ever asked? Have I ever asked what it is that they prefer? This is something that's kind of like overlooked a lot of the time. You know, we've talked before about communication plans, and sure, you can hand everybody a communication plan, but part of that is, how would you like me to contact you? Because people do have preferences. And if you're sending something to somebody in a way that they don't prefer, then it becomes a burden for them rather than a help. And finally, this is so crucial. What aspects of my brand relate to the experience I'm trying to create here? And so the example I gave before, if you think part of your brand is your responsiveness or your organization and like clear path to success, but you tend to send out invitations to your events 2 days before, then you're muddying your brand. You're giving the people an experience of something that's not in alignment with what you're trying to project to people. And you can have all kinds of other collateral material and information talking about what your values are, let's say responsiveness or organization or whatever. But if the demonstration of that falls short, then not only are people not having the experience you want them to have, they're having an experience of you that's different from what they were set up to expect. In other words, it could even amplify the gap between what they're expecting and what they're getting. So these are a whole bunch of questions that you can ask yourself at any time. And there are others, but in any given experience or any given opportunity that you have to relate with or connect with a client or a potential client or another agent or somebody else, all of these questions are valid. How can you use this? It's quite easy. Think of something that's coming up for you in the next week or 2 weeks, a specific situation where you're going to send out a mailer, or you're going to call a client to talk about something, or you're going to host an open house, or you're going to do some kind of meet and greet with other agents or whatever it is. Pick that one out of all the other things that are going on and say to yourself, let me think about how I can make sure that I'm projecting my brand authentically, powerfully, clearly in this one situation. I don't have to do it every time, but let me just practice doing it once. Then pull up all those questions. And most importantly, when you look at those questions, write down an answer to each of the questions. This is where most people fall short. They'll look at the questions, they'll say, yeah, those are good questions. Okay, I'll think about it for a minute and then I'll move on. If you force yourself to write down an answer, you force yourself to get clear, absolutely clear about what your response to them is. And this is why in a lot of our coaching, we force people to write something down, because it's easy to be 75% clear in your mind, but you can't write a sentence that's 75% clear. If you're going to write a cogent sentence, it has to be 100% clear. So try this by writing these out on a piece of paper and writing down the answers that you have and see if those answers are really valid in your mind or not. And then you're going to use this as preparation for you to nail that particular opportunity. And if you can do it once, you can do it again. And if you stumble once, then you can learn something from that and do it better the next time. But it always comes back to the same thing, which is everyone will have an experience of you every time they have an experience of you. And if you're not being thoughtful and intentional about what the experience of your brand is in that particular case, then you're likely to get some other result. And so defining your brand, which is what we talked about last time, is the first step. And then thinking about how do you project that in any time, even when you go to retreat and you meet people and start talking with them. All right, so we have time for a couple questions or comments. Sure, I'll show the questions again, Donna. Does anyone have a question about any of this?
I just want to say this is so helpful. This is the first one that I'm experiencing with you because I just started coaching with Chirag.
Mm-hmm.
But this is phenomenal, David. It's so helpful. And I captured some great nuggets in the 20 minutes of when I joined, and I really, truly appreciate this. And I know now, often what I find, so many people will make comments about who I am and my brand. For example, I went to this party, a birthday party for a former college classmate, and a number of people were coming up talking to me about, in essence, my brand. And they were like, you're killing it. I'm getting your social media, I don't send out newsletters yet. I just started. But everything that you put out there, it's just so beautiful. And these are friends from college, and they're like, it's great to see how you've evolved over time. And they're saying you've always been, a certain type of person, which I'm not trying to. They were just saying you've always been so sophisticated and a class act. And I was like, what? And these are kids, former classmates that used to goof on me and tease me. And they're like, I love what you're doing. And one of the friends who works in Greenwich at the library, he said, I tell so many people about you when they come in and they say, oh, I'm looking for an agent. And he said, can you give me some of your cards? Because I'm talking about you all the time, because I taught in Greenwich and I live there. I don't live there now, but it is part of my area. And I was shocked. I really was shocked. And so as I'm listening to you, David, I'm thinking, and all of you, Miriam, is it Miriam? No,
Miriam, yeah.
Miriam and Daniel, Michael, all of you. I see the importance of, sometimes just listening to the responses of others, of how they perceive you. And you can listen and think, what is missing, or what do I need to develop further? And that was so helpful. So helpful, David. And I'm going to join in more often. This is great. I didn't, but
Well,
anyway.
I'm so thankful for your interest in this, and that it's providing some value to you. And congratulations on creating a brand with everybody else around words like classy or sophisticated or something. If that's what your intention is, great. If you never thought about it that way anymore, then this is a time to think about, is that something that I want to be part of my brand, or do I want to have something else, to be the thing that people talk about? And you, Peggy, might want to go back to my call from last Wednesday, since you're new, where I talked about defining your brand. So if you go onto our platform and you just search events, it'll show past events going backwards from today. And you can go back to last Wednesday and it'll show defining your brand.
Thank you.
If you have any trouble getting on the platform, reach out to me, David at ChiragShahCoaching.com, and I'll connect you with someone who can get you set up. Mo, you had a hand up, and I guess that'll be our last one for time today. Mo?
So, David, I made a statement a few minutes back about, being one person, when you're working or not. I want to hear your opinion about that. That my assumption is in line or not.
When you say working on that, can you say a little more? I'm not
Okay,
quite
so
clear.
I said, again, I want to be fundamentally changed. Means the branding or the way that I want to be is not just for work, in a personal relationship.
Oh, okay, got it.
Everywhere means that it's not. So that part. Am I in line or no? Business separate, personal separate.
Yeah, got it. So for me, business is always a reflection of who you are as a person. And so one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves is not what do I want to do? It's how do I want to be? And that's a little bit closer to our own sense of identity and how we want to show up in the world. And so from my point of view, getting clear about who we are as a human being, and then thinking about how we can express that in the different roles that we play across our life, maybe as a professional, maybe as a family member, maybe as a volunteer in our community. We get to decide how to play with those principles in a way that's authentic and valuable to the world around us. And so I always think of it as an overall, this is who I am as a human being first. And then within that, I play these different roles at different times, and I can be some version of those principles, which might be your values, might be your beliefs, something like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we're a little over time, folks. Wish we could talk a little bit further about this. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone. Give thanks for all that you have in your life that you value, and I value you, so I'll be thinking of all of you over the next week, and can't wait to see you again next Wednesday. Have a great day and a great week, everyone.
Thank you.